And this is sponsored, very kindly sponsored, by these two gentlemen. We've got Jelle, Dijkstra, Jelle Dijkstra, and Gavin. E-Websites EU. They're going to be presenting about the mastering advanced template layouts in EE. And please give a big round of applause.
Well, we can leave the lights on for now.
Yeah.
Just turn off. I'll give you.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon. We should have had a presentation this morning about how to get a presentation up and running. It's taken us. So although there's been a delay getting the lunch organized, we used almost all of that time to try and get this on the screen. So just want to, before we start, to say many, many thanks to the multiple people here whose technology and skills have made it possible to get this picture on the screen. It's going to improve the quality of the presentation immeasurably, that you can actually see what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's very good. Anyway, the other thing ahead of doing the talk, I was told years ago you should never apologize at the start of a talk, but we're going to anyway. And that is, we have a plan for what we're going to do during the time we've got available. But in this country, there's a fascination with programs about crafts. So sewing, cooking, all that sort of stuff. And invariably, there's people who are hopeless doing this stuff. And the experts walk around and say, have you had a practice of doing this thing? And they say, oh, well, matter. Well, in this case, Jelle and I haven't practiced this. So we...
At all?
So hopefully, it's going to go as well as we planned it. But asterisk, we haven't actually had a run through of this in real time. So it'll be what it's going to be, hopefully useful. Anyway, right, let's get going. Right. Jelle and I doing the presentation just in terms of background and stuff. We haven't got a long thing to say. JCOGS Design is me, and it's the organization, such as it is, behind JCOGS Image. If you've ever seen that, it's a well-known add-on for ExpressionEngine. And Jelle?
Been developing EE stuff since B Machine, so been around a bit.
And a monster big agency in the
huge.
Yeah, huge. Yes.
And we just started EWebsites.eu as a kind of collective collaboration thing. More on that later. But
yes, in the thing tomorrow, whenever it's called, the chaos session tomorrow.
Yeah,
we'll talk about it some more. Right. One more thing, and it's a different kind of apology. This is just because I am noticeably distinctive, so people tend to recognize me from a distance. I can't think what it is, but something about me makes me identifiable from a distance. I have, unfortunately, a defect, which is this long word here, which in normal language is called face blindness. My ability to recognize faces and associate them with names is terrible. So you will recognize me really easily, and I may have met you an hour ago, half an hour ago, and I remember meeting you, but I have no idea what your name is. So if it comes across that I'm being Englishly indifferent to you, it's not that I'm trying to get your message across to you. It's just I have no idea what your name is because my brain is not telling me what your name is. I'm aware that I recognize faces, fine. I just don't have the names to go with the face. So I apologize in advance if you come up to me and ask me a question and I have no idea what your name is. It's not any kind of slight on you. It's just the fact that I don't recognize faces. And I've learned over the years it's better to get this out the way up front rather than retrospective. Now you ask me, I can tell you. But anyway, so that's just so you know that. I'm only saying that because having stood up here, you might come up to me later on and ask a question about what we've been doing, and I'll have no idea who you are. And that's not personal at all. Right, onwards. Topics for today. We're going to talk about template layouts. And some people are very familiar with them. It's been around in EE for a long time. Others are familiar with them and never used them. The reason we thought to do this presentation is Jelle and I use them a lot. And over about a year, up until whenever the announcement for things to talk about at the conference came out, Jelle and I were noticing that in Slack, people were putting in questions saying, how do I do this? Answer, use a template layout. How do I do this? Use a template layout. And it seems that that repeated quite regularly. And we thought, well, maybe there's some value for us to spend some time explaining what this template layout stuff is all about. And it may be you're very familiar and we can show you some clever tricks. It may be that you're not familiar and you'll say, oh, that's actually quite useful after all.
And maybe you guys can learn us a trick or two that we don't know yet.
Exactly. And it may well be that part of what we had in mind with this is to make this into a Q&A bit as well. So maybe you've got some questions that you've already got in back in mind about things you've done or things you'd like to do, and you can ask us and maybe we can answer those questions as we go. So we're going to talk a bit about how you can use layouts to build page content. We're going to introduce a thing called layout variables, which are an extension to template layouts. We're going to talk about layout variable arrays. It starts getting complicated, but that's even more clever. And we can use layouts to help in debugging sites that you build and also help you get rid of things like embeds and stash. So we're going to try and cover all that in the time that we have. Fingers crossed, whatever. Okay. Oh, and if at some point Jelle disappears and walks off, it's just because we've got a
business call
that is scheduled that was fine because we were going to start at 1:30.
Now it's, yeah.
So Jelle might disappear later on. But
Otherwise, no drinks tonight. Because,
right, let's get going. Okay, everyone with me so far? Am I talking too quickly and does it make sense at the back? The nods. No, okay. No. If it doesn't make sense, just put your hand up or wave or something, because there's no point me talking and it doesn't make any sense. So just say. Right, concepts. Layouts are a way to let you build up a template progressively. So rather than having one file, which is all of the instructions that will make a page appear when EE runs through and processes it, it lets you break that template down into multiple little bits. And there are a number of reasons why that's useful. But in practice, what that means is you can turn a single complicated template into a set of templates that are joined up, and each one is slightly more understandable and slightly more workable than having some very, very complicated thing. And the reason why I think they came about is that people were building templates that had conditionals and blocks that appeared and didn't appear. And if you just have them in one long template, it goes on and on and on and on, and you lose the plot and you leave out closing tags and all sorts, and it gets very difficult.
And the template parser gets confused easily too.
It does, yes. So anyway, so it's a way around that. You can turn a long template into a collection of shorter templates. It also lets you simplify some or complex things, or do things which are super complicated that otherwise would be hard to do in one template. It helps with keeping your designs for templates dry if you are interested in dry, and everyone knows what dry means. Don't repeat yourself. Yeah. And so you can build a site where you can make sure that all the templates basically have the same underlying HTML shape, but you put different content in, rather than repeating the same thing over and over again and then finding that you forgot to edit one of them. And then later on, there's one page that's got the wrong footer or the what, you know. So it helps you reduce those sorts of problems. And at a more technical level, it's actually quite an efficient way of working because it avoids having more than one EE evaluation instance running at the same time. And so when you're actually processing a page in a template, EE takes off the template and does stuff to it to work out what to put in for the variables and does the channel entry things and so on. If you do things like run embeds, EE creates yet another instance of the whole EE framework for that embed, does its stuff, and then comes back and carries on. If you use layouts, you can avoid some of that stuff, and it makes your page processing run slightly faster. It's less intensive on the server, and there's all good things. All right, so we'll try and cover all these concepts. If we haven't at the end, wave at me, and we'll try and work out what we missed, but that's the plan for what we're going to do in terms of concepts. Some terminology. And this is just, again, because we've got to call them something. And there is a thing about templates and template layouts in EE where the terminology associated with some bits of it isn't very well established. And so people call the same thing different things. And so this is just what we're going to call it today. You may call it something else, but this is what we're going to call it today. So the first thing is we've got this thing called a template stack. So if you take a template and you break it down into 4 or 5 little bits, that set of templates has to have a name of some kind, and we call it a stack. So that's, you could call it something else, don't really mind, but in today's presentation, we're going to call it a stack. Okay. There is a layout tag. The thing that enables layouts to work is one little simple EE tag that you stick into a template, and that's really important. Without that, none of this works, and we're going to call that the layout tag. A couple of rules about it. It must be the first evaluated tag in a template. So you can't stick it in the middle of a template. It's got to be the first thing that EE hits. The second thing about it, which we'll come back to in a bit, is you can't really do much to the content of that. So you can't stick conditionals in there. You can't put a channel entry call in the middle of the tag. It's basically got to have just a value. So layout tag with some content, and that's it. But we'll come back to that. We will talk about something called the contents variable, which is the most simple way of using layout templates. We'll talk about it in practice, but there's a thing called a contents variable. We'll also talk about layout variables, which are the thing that makes all this really helpful and useful and clever. And then we'll also talk about layout variable arrays. And the layout variables and layout variable arrays are just special kinds of variables that you can store things in as you are working with stuff. So it's just a place you can shove stuff. But the way that the template layouts work, they're actually what makes it really, really useful. So it's a good thing to get. The last 2 things are quite important.
Right on.
Right, okay.
Doing great.
I'm doing good.
Yeah.
Right. Using layouts to build up page content. So this is the most simple example of how you can use these things. It's like the ground zero. If you've used template layouts, you've probably done what I'm going to show you now. But this is just like making sure that if you don't know what these things are, this is just get everyone at the same level. So this is just a simple template. It's just the kind of thing that you would have. And if you evaluate this template, you get this kind of stuff output. Okay, so it's just, you've done this in EE loads of times. You've written a template, you open up the page, and EE generates some content for you. Okay. I think, yeah, there we go. And as you can see, it's just an HTML framework, and it's got a channel entry call in it, and it's got a couple of add-on calls to our add-on. And that's, it's basic, simple stuff. So how can we make this use template layouts, is the question. Or we do it like this. So what we've done here is we've broken this template into 2 bits. So on the left, we've got a bit of, I'll show you the content in detail in a second, some content, and at the top, we've got a layout tag, and then we've got another template that then reuses that content to build the page. In practice, you use the same URL, nothing changes there. You get the same output, but you have 2 steps rather than 1 to build up the template before you see it. Let's have a look at the content. So here, this is the first of the templates. So this is what's called image testing, down here, image testing.html. And all it contains is the channel entry call and the tags that we had before. Okay, so I've just taken, for this example, the evaluated content from EE and stuck it in its own template. At the top of the template, there's a little tag that says layout equals, and then there's a location for a template. And the location for the template is the second of these templates. It's got home with HTML. If we look at that one, this is the rest of that original template we saw on the previous page. So it's got the HTML framework, and it's got a special thing lurking in here where it says layout contents. and you refer back to that thing about terminology, we talked about the content variable. This is how you get the content variable. And what layout contents does is it takes whatever was evaluated by EE with the previous template, whatever that output looks like, and just dumps it into the template at the point you've chosen. Okay? So here, this evaluates, we get the stuff that generates this content, and EE then just dumps all of that between those two body tags, and then evaluates that new page to generate the output that appears on the screen. Okay. So that's a very simple example of how these things work. It's not rocket science at all, but by splitting it up like this, you could have several pages that have content on them, and they could all have the same tag at the top saying, get me the basic HTML for the page.
Yeah.
And you only have one of these, and maybe half a dozen of these, and that way every page would use the same base HTML when ExpressionEngine then builds the page for you. It can be quite handy. It helps avoid the case where you've got lots of pages and you forget to edit one and you get the wrong footer on the odd page. So far, so good. You can actually extend this model beyond having just one template. So here we've got multiple templates. On template, the first template we call a second template, the second template we call a third template, and that calls our HTML-based template and generates the page. Okay? When you do this, the URL you use is still the same you had before. It's still the one for the first template in the sequence. You can have as many of these templates as you want. You can have, we've done sites with 7 or 8 or 9 of these templates before you actually get to where you want to go to, and we'll talk about why you might do that later on in this session. The only other thing to bear in mind is each time you go from one template to the next, the content of the layout contents variable that we saw changes. So when you've done this template, EE will put all of the output from this template into layout contents. Okay. When this template has been evaluated by EE, that variable gets replaced by all of the output from this template. So if you've got stuff in here that you wanted to use later on, you'll lose it because layout contents gets overwritten by whatever's in here. So you need to make sure that if there's something in here you want to use in here, you put it in here before you finish processing the template. And when you get to the next one, you get a new layout contents based on what this one evaluated to be. So there's a limitation. If you're using layout contents, there's a limitation, which is every time you move to a new template, it gets evaluated. But there's also a benefit, which is that each time you jump from one template to the next, EE finishes its evaluation. Right? So it processes the template completely, and you end up with raw HTML, and it just sticks raw HTML into the next template, and you carry on. And that's actually quite handy when you're trying to do things like nesting stuff and whatever. We'll come back to those in the more complex examples. Okay, so here's an example, a very, very simple, crude example of how this works when you're doing multiple templates. So now we have 2 templates going to our HTML thing, and we've got the same output down here. So we start off with just one of the 2 halves of the original template. So I've got the left-hand side of the template. I'm running a channel entry tag, and it produces some output. And then we go to the next template. And here, this is the rest of the content of the page that we looked at in the first example back here. And so we've got the channel entry tag, and we've got in here, where the left-hand side was, we've now got layout content. So I'm saying take all of this stuff and just insert it into the template here, and then evaluate the rest of the template how you like. Now, because this has been processed, it doesn't get evaluated again. It's just the output from whatever was here gets shoved into this gap in this text. But because we're running a new channel entries call here, this side gets evaluated when this template gets run through. And this generates a new layout contents, which has got this bit inserted within the output of all this stuff here. And then this goes on to the same thing we had before, just the HTML background and layout contents gets inserted down here as well. But all that's changed is this time, to get this contents, I've done two things rather than one. And it's just an illustration of how you break these things down more and more if you want to. Now, I'm sure you'll be asking, why would I want to? And we'll come back to that hopefully before the end of this. So far so good. Any questions about what I've said so far before we get more complicated? You with me so far? So far so good.
Yeah.
Well, we're hoping for the after lunch. Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
we got that. That's it. Right, okay, layout variables. Layout variables are a special version of the layout contents variable. Okay, so it's a generalization of the contents variable. What it does is it allows you to store stuff in named variables. So you can take arbitrary bits of evaluated output from a template and stick them in something with a name, and then later on call it back and use it. It's a way of substituting things into your output, much like you would do with pro variables, or you would do with, in some cases, stash or embeds or whatever. It's a way of getting stuff in one place and then reusing it later on in the stream. But it's much more flexible than the old CE variables or pro variables would be. One of the big things about it is you can attach variable modifiers to layout variables. So you can get a bit of content from your earlier templates, and then you can push it through a variable modifier and play games with it if you want to, which you can't do so easily with some of the other ways of storing values in ExpressionEngine. And it can be used within conditionals. So you can get your variable and stick it in a conditional and evaluate it as part of a conditional. And it also enables a really handy thing, which is conditional template layout flows, which becomes really cool when you can do that. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But let's first talk about how the variable bit works. There are three ways you can create a layout variable. They are not that different, but they're worth highlighting the differences. One is you can stick it in the layout tag itself. So much like you would with an embed variable, you can just stick some stuff after your layout tag and give it a name and give it a value, and that will be available in the next template that you come to. It's a way of getting the value in there. The second thing is, in the template whilst you're evaluating it, you can put in a tag which is a layout set tag, and you just put the name of the variable and you put the value in as a value equals type thing. So it's a simple one-shot variable. You can put stuff in. This can contain evaluated content. You can put like a channel entry variable in there if you want to, but it's just a short form of getting your variable defined. And the third way of doing it is to use a tag pair, where you have an opening variable, some stuff, and a closing variable. And this some stuff can be huge. It can be acres and acres of HTML if you want it to be. It's anything. Basically, these things, these layout variables contain any kind of string that you can imagine, and within reason, it can be as big as you can imagine as well. So it's just a whole load of string text goes in there.
You can just stick all kind of channel entries, add-on pathing and add-on tags into that, and it will run and become available in the next template as a string, as HTML.
Right. Okay. So that's three ways to set. We'll give you an example of how this works in a sec. How do you get them back? You simply use a short form which says layout and the name of the variable. And if you put that into your template, it will get converted by EE into whatever you saved into that variable in the first place. If this variable hasn't been set to anything, you get like a 0 length string. So you get nothing back. Constraint, it's only available from the template after the one in which you define it. Okay, so what happens is when EE evaluates a template, if there's a layout set in there, it gets created when the template is evaluated before you move on to the next one, but it keeps a record of all the layout variables that you create. They then become available through the rest of your stack. So if you've got 17 more templates to go, the ones you create are always available all the way through the rest of what you're doing. you haven't got to keep on resaving them like you do with the layout contents one, so they become perpetually available. You can overwrite them, so as you go through, you can set them on one template, on a later template you can change them to something else, and they'll hold the new value you give them. They can be combined into new you can include layout variables in other layout variables you're going to define, so you can build up new layout variables based on ones you've already got. And you can have these variable modifiers attached, so you can put a limit on how long they're going to be and get something. So you could define a variable that contains a long string and then create a new layout variable with a sort of shortened version of the string by using a variable modifier. So that's good. Let's do an example of this. Right, same page. At the beginning, we've got the same left-hand thing, but rather than just leaving it and using layout contents, I'm sticking all of this content into a new variable called body left. Okay, so I'm creating the content, sticking it into a variable called body left. In this one, same thing, and I'm sticking it into a variable called body right. There at the end of it, I got that highlight one. And then we get to the third template. I've just got body left and body right being recalled. And so you get a block of content, put it all together, and add in those two things. And when this page is evaluated, it will contain all of this stuff and the contents of whatever we saved here and here. And it all goes into the same base HTML template that we had before. It's a trivial example. It's not really something you do in practice. It's quite inefficient because we have 3 channel entry runs when actually we only actually needed 1, but it's an illustration of how this all might work. Okay. Right. Last of these things, this is really where it starts to become fun. This is what's called a conditional template layout pattern. And so the terminology in this stuff is, someone who's good at this ought to come up with some better names for these things. You remember I said the first tag in template cannot contain conditionals. If that was the only limitation, you wouldn't be able to control how your template layouts get evaluated and introduce any kind of dynamism into your template. So you just have the same sequence every single time. But there's a way around this, which is you can put a named layout variable into the template tag. So here we got the template tag layout equals, but we're sticking into it a variable that we've saved earlier in our work. Okay, and then this tag will go to wherever this variable tells it to. And that's really powerful because you can then work out what to put into this variable using any conditionals you like. Really helpful. So here's the same example again. What I've done this time is I've changed it so that you only get to see this if you're logged in. If you're not logged in, you just go to a login screen. How do we do this? Well, like this. So here, we've got a different target. So we're now saying go to home and switch. So the template it goes to after this page has been evaluated is one called switch. In here, the first bit works out the left-hand side of the page just like it would anyway previously. But down here, we've got a thing that says we're going to set the name of this switch variable to the login screen. Okay? So if nothing else happens, this value gets set to the login screen, and the next thing you do is get the processing will be transferred to whatever template you've got that works out the login, and EE will show you the login screen. Then we've got a conditional that says if the person's logged in, actually we're going to change this variable and we're going to set switch to image testing 2. And so if when this page is being evaluated, the person is logged in, this value gets a different target. What happens then is we go to this very, very small template called switch.html, and it's got one line in it. And the one line says, go to whatever you've got in layout switch. And because we've got this conditional here, it'll either go to the login screen or it'll go and start the process of going through these pages that we talked about before and generate the output you've got down here. And that gives you a whole load of flexibility when it comes to working out what you're going to do with how your pages appear and how they're structured that you wouldn't otherwise have. So you can have not just doing this test on a login, you could do this test on a value, you could do this test on whether someone's bought something or not, you could do this test on whether the date has gone past the end of the month. You can have all sorts of things that might drive these switching behaviors, but it gives you the chance to modify the layout of a page dynamically based on something that you've worked out earlier in the process of building the page up. And that's quite a nice thing to have. And it's one of these things where in another universe, it would be more visible in ExpressionEngine lore, because actually once you know how to do this, you can use it a lot. And it makes what you're able to do with building pages much, much more interesting than if you're just stuck with it's that page, it's that page, it's that page. And anyway, so, and also it means you avoid redirects, because the other way of doing this would be to have a redirect. So you'd have your conditional and then redirect, and then you start loading a new page completely. This way you can have your redirect, but it's within the build of the page. So it doesn't actually lead to more traffic from the server, it doesn't need to refresh your browser. It's really helpful. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Over to me. Right, a couple of years ago we built this website, and it's just, I'm going to be using this for illustrating a lot of the things Gavin said and maybe make it more tangible. This is a website where people can create their own gift list for a marriage or baby shower or a party or something. They can create their own gifts, and they can source payments. People can do partial payments on the gifts the people put on their website. Well, it's all nice, and that's maybe not the thing, but there is also a way that people can see the results of whatever happens. So people are buying stuff, and so we had to find a way without add-ons and without custom PHP, blah, 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 just try to do something natively within EE that gathers all this complex information from various gifts, various gift lists, various options to calculate the amount the people are going to get into their bank account. So, layout variables helped a lot with that. Let me go to Lynn. So this is, I mean, the front end for the general public, I just skip. It's just do the back end. Right, Lynn had a baby shower. 5 people have given a gift worth 105 euros. Right, you click on view the results. And now you see, okay, blah, blah has bought this and paid 10 euros. Somebody else bought 2 gifts or something, is 50 euros. Then we have a lot of things, a fee that has to be deducted. Did they buy off the payment cost, or well, all kinds of options they have for earning money from the site, and people have to buy them. So we had to find a way to get all that stuff worked out in a reliable and transparent way.
Jelle, might be worth checking to see whether actually you can read that. I don't know if that's how legible that is.
Maybe. Is it? Let's take this one away.
High contrast CPU?
Right.
It might be, but I'm just wondering whether it's worth sticking it on the screen, because I can't read that from here. I know I can't read it.
Can you guys
I know
read
what it's
it?
supposed to say.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Now look. Okay. Well, if people come at the results page, we have a stack of a total of 5 templates that they go through. And in the first, first thing we do is set the layout tag where we are going after this one. And we do some checks and blah, blah, blah. Then we are getting the IDs of the donations that people made, which are purchases in Carthrop. And we're sticking that in a piped array in this, so not a, so this just string, not an array, right? Yeah. Same we do for some other things, some stuff from the fees that the organization gets, and some transaction fees and some costs, some payments we are looking up with ProSearch, sticking those into variables, well, etc., etc. There's a lot. And then we go to the next template where we have all those variables set available. Close this one. And first we say we're going to the next step. All those variables are available, and now we are going to do a conditional. What kind of payment method was chosen based upon what was set before. So if this layout variable or the other one is true, then we are setting another layout variable. Also, we're doing a calculation with EEConf in this case to get out some values, etc. That's the way we do a lot of different results and setting them into new layout variables.
Yeah, and just one thing, that page you've just been looking at, it has, I think, 6 or 7 numbers that are being calculated based on conditionals. It doesn't, that page itself doesn't generate any output that you'll see. It's only generating layout variables that we can then use later on in the process. What you end up with eventually when you're doing this sort of work is you find you spend as much time building layout variables you can use later as you do about building content you can see. But this is a good example of one where there's no actual content that the user sees coming from the page that the template you just worked through. It's just a whole load of more numbers derived from the numbers you worked out on the first one.
Yeah. So a practical use here is if people buy a gift with a credit card, they have to pay like 5% fee, the person who gets it. So they want to revert those costs back to the people, to the clients, or deduct it from the total sum they're paying out. So we have a calculation here that determines how much 5.2% of the total sum is put that into another layout variable, so we can deduct that from the total sum to pay in a later stage. That's this one. And still, this is all invisible to the user. I should get a license for this. We just put it on the laptop this week or for the presentation. So, well, not a step, but the same. And then in the end, we have a template. And this one renders the main layout, so the HTML wrapper. Does it right? Put everything from this stack of calculations and layout setting and blah, blah, and put the final result into a design and throw that in the main HTML wrapper. So all our in this template, nothing happens. Only thing that happens is layout variables from previous pages are being displayed. And then it's all wrapped into the layout contents and put into the main HTML wrapper. I think that's it for this one.
Right.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Okay, moving on. So that's step one, if you like. Step one. Okay. So before we get on to the next one, which is that, but amped up a bit. Yeah, thank you. Is anything not clear? Are you like looking at this thinking, I have no idea what he's talking about? Because there's no point going on the next thing if you had no idea what the last bit was about. So anybody struggling with anything that has been said so far, hopefully you all absolutely ace and done all this before and you know all about it. So looks like no one's going to answer my question. Yes, sir.
That was more of a philosophical question.
Philosophical question.
What's the key part that informs your decision to make a new layout and add another level to that processing stack? Is it a calculation or it's like rendering?
It's because you can't do it any other way usually. So
unless you use an embed.
Huh?
Unless you use an embed.
Okay, right.
You can use embeds, but that means EE has to start up again, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So if you get all the information you need in each step, and if you need to like have a calculation and you need the result of that calculation to be something else, you take it to a next layout template, because you set something first, you do some calculations based on a couple of values, and then you have to do something with that result, so you need a third one.
Yeah.
Just to piggyback on that, it's also good for drive, right? You keep drive moving. I would also say, for simplicity, there's times just having another layout actually makes the flow a lot better than having, a 500-line template.
Yeah.
And also it works better in a template parser because it can get confused with lots of, if you have lots of conditionals. And I don't know how it comes, that's some PHP guys here who would probably know, but these are really parsed per template. So you get what's parsed in this template, all the conditions, and then the next template gets parsed. Well, if the parser gets confused, it starts parsing whatever in that template.
Yeah, basically it's isolating stuff, and so one of the drivers is, because if you don't have another template in the stack, there's something you can't work out, and a lot of the time you do it the other way around, which is you start off with a number of templates, you think it's going to be this many, and then you find there's a number, suddenly we need this number, and the only way to work out this number is to have it stored somewhere, and therefore you need to put another step into the process. It's one of these things that evolves. I don't think you can sit down before you build that sort of heap of templates and know in advance it's going to be 5 or 3 or 2. But as you work through trying to build up the information that you want to display, the number of templates that you need sort of answers itself, because sometimes you are driven by this thing where the number you want isn't available until the next template. So in the example Jelle was just showing, we had an initial template that worked out, is it a credit card or is it a Venmo transfer or something like that? And until we know that, and we get that by looking at the kind of stuff that comes out of CartSwap, until we know that, we can't then do working out what the fee is going to be, because the fee depends on which of those you've done. And there's no easy way in EE to do that conditional maths within the framework of the stuff that EE makes available to you. But if we work out it's a card or it's a Venmo, in the next template, we can have a conditional that says which one is it, and we can have pre-written bits of template code that work out the answer to whichever question we know the question now is. And it's that kind of thing. We need to do the conditional, you need that number, or to do the calculation, you need that number, or that bit of information, or that string, and that stuff determines where you put the breaks in the layout flow more so than any other kind of architectural consideration. But Tom's points are good. So we always have like an underlying HTML framework that all the pages will have the same header and same footer and stuff. And that's like a given. And so there's always at least one, because you have whatever you're doing and the HTML framework that goes with it. But in other circumstances, it gets more complicated. Yeah.
So where does template actually play?
At the very end of this presentation. Very end of
Hey, we got you covered.
Yeah, we've got you covered on that one. But later. Yes, sir.
I just love to call out what you guys did mention. Using a layout variable to call the next layout is extremely powerful.
Yeah.
So once you get the habit of that, it's like, it opens a lot of doors.
Yeah, and it's one of these things that there's a lot to like about. We'll come back to the documentation. There's a lot to like about the documentation for template layouts in EE. But one of the things that's absolutely missing totally is any discussion of the fact that you can use layout variables in template tags to do this conditional switching. I think that one of these days, someone's going to end up writing some extra text that goes into the documentation to make that clearer, because it's like, it's a really, really, really useful thing when you get the hang of it. And if you go away from today's little presentation with nothing else, knowing that you can do this conditional switching during a build of a template, rather than doing a redirect, it's huge.
And and it's mainly like not on your everyday brochure website that you're going to be needing this, but once you start getting into more like an application, like really functional websites where people make choices and stuff depends on choices, then it's really,
Right, scooting
Next
on.
one.
Right, layout variable arrays. Okay, those of you who are mathematical orientated will know that that just means we have sets of numbers in a layout variable rather than just one number in a layout variable. The terminology for this in documentation is confusing. In some places they're called lists, in other places they're called other things. We're going to call them arrays. They're not really arrays, but they're sort of arrays. It's more like an array than anything else, I suppose. They're used to store collections of things. The things that you store are still just strings of text, okay? But you can have multiple strings of text, and you can reference individual bits within the array as you go. And it makes some things an awful lot easier. They're quite fiddly to get going on, but once you've got the hang of it, they're magic. You can do really, really clever things once you've got the hang of it, but getting your brain tuned into how it works is interesting, and there are some quirks to do with the way they're implemented in EE, which can be frustrating at times. But we'll cover those. Right. So how do you set them? You have two new tags. So we had layout set previously for just setting a single variable. If you want to do one of these arrays, you use either set append or you do prepend. And as the name suggests, append sticks the next value after the first value, and you can build a list that way, or an array that way. And prepend puts the new value before the one you've done. And the way it works out what it's putting it before or after is whatever name you give it. So whatever the name is, append will add something to titles, prepend will add something to the beginning of titles. And the titles is this array of values, and it's whether it goes at one end or the other end is all you're controlling. And you can set them using the tag pair arrangement that we looked at before. And as before, you can put anything into this gap. Basically, anything that EE can generate, you can stick into the gap, and that the evaluated output of whatever is in that gap will be saved in the value that you're creating. So far, so good. How do you get them back? You get them back in the same way that you get back normal layout variables, but you have a tag pair. So you open and close, and in between the opening and closing named pairs, you get the opportunity to access the looped values like you would with a channel entry call. Okay, so it's the same sort of concept, or with, for example, if you're doing file manager, like a file opening, closing thing, same sort of thing. Let's look at an example. So here's one. So we've got this layout titles we had on the previous page, and we've got closing it down here. Within this, when you evaluate this, EE will go through every single value that you saved in titles, and each time we'll try and pass this content. So once for each value. So you get access to things like index, count, total results, just like you would from channel entry. So you can do things like have conditionals based on, is it the first one in the sequence, is it the last one in the sequence? And if you want the value itself, you just put in a variable called value. It's really straightforward. So if you want to get that loop back that we saved, you just use something like that and use the value variable, and you'll just get all the values back out. And if you surround that value by some HTML and ExpressionEngine tags, that will all get evaluated and dumped in to the output that you generate. It's really not that complicated. Quite handy.
I can illustrate that one here.
Oh, quite fine.
If you look at it, like these gifts that people can pay for those gifts in a different way. Like, okay, if people use the payment gateway Ideal, which is a European payment gateway, we will deduct 95 cents per order as payment cost from the total.
5 cents.
95 cents.
95 cents. Okay, 95
Yeah.
cents. Okay.
So we need to know how many of those Ideal payments there were, because otherwise the client pays the payment cost, and that's not. So what we do, we set channel entries, order items from CardDrop, so we get all the orders, and then we layout set append a value named a variable named Ideal, and for each one we do +1. Right, so that would mean +1, +1, +1, +1. If you have a few. So in the next template, when we get that array, let me see if I can quickly find that. What?
Yes,
Yeah,
a string.
it's a string. Yeah, and let me quickly see if I can find the right one. Yeah. Here, okay, the layout tells us Ideal was used, so then we have to calculate the number of times we do 95 cents. So now we're setting a new layout variable, Ideal total payments, and then we have MXCalc doing this, and that is layout.ideal value, so that is +1 for each time it was used, if you understand. And MXCalc just does 0, yeah, it's just a limitation you have to do. That's 0 +1 +1 +1 is 5, and so it tells me 5 times there was a payment with Ideal. And in the next template I can do, oh, I know it's 5, so I have to do 5 times 95 cents.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, and because of the limitations with doing how you do maths in EE, you see at the moment quite a lot of this sort of game where what we're doing with the first thing is we're using a string +1 to construct what then becomes a formula seen by MXCalc, and MXCalc then works out that formula into a number, and then we use that number. It's long-winded, and there might be better ways of doing it in future where, you know, if EE ever got around to supporting maths properly. But until it does, this is a good workaround if you need to do this sort of dynamic calculation on the fly as you're working through.
The only other way we could have done this was probably by doing a custom add-on. And custom add-ons are fine, but they take away like transparency in what's happening. Yeah. So if you want to, here we can just go into the template manager and debug really easily.
Yeah, it's horses for courses. But anyway, excellent. Yeah, push on otherwise.
Exactly. Time.
Right. Okay, actually, strangely enough, we actually got that example that Jelle has done is what we've got here. So
right.
we won't go through this one again, but that's exactly what it's saying, that you can do these things in that way. So just adding the values up.
That's what you were doing last time.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Those arrays are nice enough in their own right, but the fun comes when you use multiple arrays at the same time. So what Jelle was talking through, this thing about where you can use it to get a mathematical calculation done, handy. You can do other things like that with single arrays. This using multiple arrays together opens up a whole new world of opportunity, but also a whole new world of pain. So it's like, up and down on this one. The way you get into using multiple arrays together is an extension to how you get the value back. So we talked about the fact that you could just use a tag pair saying layout and the name of your variable array. You can actually stick a parameter in saying index. And if you've got 6 things in your array, they'll be numbered 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you can put in the variable array and I want value 4. And EE will turn that into the 4th value in that array that you've defined. Really helpful. How do you use this with multiple things? Well, I said before, when you're doing a looped output, so when you're doing these tag pairs, so you've defined an array and you're going through it, EE makes available things like index and count and total results and all that sort of stuff. Well, the conventional way of getting these values back when you want to have more than one array working at the same time is to choose one of them to generate go through a whole load of looping type stuff. So here we've got a thing called orders, and it's running through and it's producing a line of output for each order that we've got defined in our array. And here it says the value of the order value, and this is whatever the content of the entry of order that we've got to is, and here we've got another one, okay, which is a different array, which we saved somewhere else, which is something to do with credit cards, and the index is the value of index for this thing here, okay? So I guess I should put index in there. So if you write index and then curly brackets index in here, rather than whatever value is, the index curly bracket value is set to wherever we are in this sequence. So on the first one of these, we get the first value, and we get the first credit card entry appended to the string. On the second of these, we get the second value and the second credit card entry appended to the end of the string, and so on. And so we've got 2 different arrays. We could have got them from 2 completely different places earlier in our template stack, but here, by doing this thing, we can combine the 2 together and get output from both arrays happening concurrently. And we get, instead of 2 different arrays, we get a new thing, which is a whole load of strings, which say value 1, value 2, value 3, value 4, and what the credit card spend was. It becomes really handy when you get the hang of it, but this index thing is really annoying because I was working on a really messy site when we did Jelle, anyway, a long time ago, working on this really messy site, and we got to a point where we had to write an add-on. We had to write an add-on because of quoting. Because this needed index with quotes around it, there's a maximum depth you can go to in nesting these things together. And we reached the limit where
that's pretty easily.
And we pushed beyond that limit, and we couldn't actually access the value that we wanted to have in here because we needed too many levels of quotes, and we only had 2 available to us in EE, and it was like, ugh. So we had to write an add-on. So, and I'm sure there's a better way of doing this index thing than index equals some quote evaluated value. I'm not sure what it is, but actually this is a real pain, and you spend a lot of time just working around the fact that this has this form that it does. But nonetheless, it works. In most part, it works, and you can do very clever things with it. But if we could find a better way of doing this indexing, it would be even better still. Anyway, right. So we did that. I've done that.
Yes, Seth.
I have a question about that, because one of the things that I run into with those layout lists is that they're not, it doesn't seem like they are sortable or filterable the way
Yeah.
you often want to deal with arrays. Can you find a way
No, you
around
can. No, you can do. I mentioned a bit later on, but you can attach order by and all sorts of limit and all sorts of some of the, not all of the channel entry tags, but some of the channel entry constraints like backspace. You can add all those in to the opening tag in your pair, and they usually get applied. So if you've got, like when we're doing those +1, +1, +1, +1 type things, you can have, you can do it the other way around, do 1 + 1 + 1 +, and you don't need the naught at the beginning. And then you just put backspace 1 in your opening tag, and you lose the last plus because backspace takes off the last plus. So you can do that, and you can do order by, definitely. Some of the ones that you might want to do, maybe you can't. But again, there are ways in which access to these array list things could be improved. But you can do an awful lot with what's there at the moment.
And you can always juggle it into the next template and do something there to get the order, you know?
Right, anyway, so how might you use this in practice? So here we go. This is a thing which is really, this is the first of the sort of like nerdy ones, okay? This is what's called an offset array. Yeah. This is what's called an offset array. So we've got the idea of these arrays. We've got one thing we saved one place, something else we saved somewhere else, and we were accessing them both together. Okay. Sometimes you want to do things where you want, for example, well, this is a good example of it, but you want to have comparisons of before and after. So what's the next in the list? What was the previous one in the list? You can do that with these arrays quite easily, and you can, it unlocks some things which would be very hard to do otherwise. We call them offset arrays. I don't know why we call them offset arrays, but probably because they're a bit offset. And what you do is,
Hey, let's go.
Yeah, what we do is this. So this is a
I'm
bit.
escaping.
Huh?
I'm escaping my time. Sorry.
Okay. All right. And he was gone.
And I'm gone. Yeah. Bye.
Yeah. Okay. Right. See you later. Oh.
Crap.
Oh.
What was that?
Nothing happened, Ellie. That's all right. Just
No, if
You
I've got my
you
power cable,
You just
I'm fine.
destroyed the table. It's fine. Don't
Oh,
worry
that's
about it.
that's normal. But I don't.
That's
need
yours?
it.
No,
Yeah.
worries. That's yours. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Projector's done, neither one of you need a projector anymore.
Probably not.
No more projectors.
No, we'll turn it on. Yeah. Right, you've just got me from now on. Right, anyway, never mind. You'll cope, I hope. Okay, so, right, so this is, it looks horribly messy, but I can't think of any other way of showing you on this sort of screen. This is a simple channel entry loop, okay? It just does some channel entry stuff. And it's collecting up information about an event. And in here, as you can see, we're just building loads of these variable template layout variable arrays. So we've got one called account, one called the Unix time, one with the date in formatted version. We've got the title, we've got an ID number for it, and we've got the month. Okay, and all these are being generated off the channel entry list that we started with, and we're just using regular EE date formatting to chuck out the numbers. But we've got one down here called event month previously. What was the previous event month? And it has the same value as the event month. Okay, so we've got the same value being recorded twice, but into two different arrays. And then we've got the day and whatever. But after the channel entry finishes, we've got an extra line, and these are all appends. These are all adding to the end of the array. Here we've got one that says add something to the beginning of the array called events month previous, and we add just junk. But we add an extra value to the first entry of this particular array. Very sneaky, yeah. How is this helpful? Some of you may have worked it out already, but if not, this is what you do. We do this. So here, we're replaying our list. So I've just chosen one of them at random. This is the count of the events that we're working through. It's just to get this looping array thing being chucking out values. And we go through and we generate some table rows that have content taken from the things that we were saving before. And here you see we've got this one, event month, and we're using this index value. So the index of this count is helping us work out which value from this array we want to display in sequence going through. But at the beginning, we've got this conditional. Okay, and it says, if the layout of event month for this instance of count is the same as the previous one, okay, put in some content. All right? If it's, so yeah, put in some content. If it's not the same, don't put any content in. Because we've added that extra junk value at the beginning, the value of the month for the proper month is actually whatever month it was that event took place in. But the first time we come through this one, the value of this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? So the first time we get through, these aren't equal and it gets skipped. The next one, this month, is the second month in our list. This month actually is the first month in the list because it was the first month, but we pushed it down a row. And so by doing this, we can compare, has the month changed? In this row, are we on a new month or not? And you can do things like you could insert the name of the month when that happens and so on. And you can't do that any other way. So if you want to have that happening and you're not going to write an add-on, you're not going to do anything really weird and complicated, you can't do that. But if you do this, you can open up this access. You can have a little conditional that says, am I on a new month, yes or no? And all that we did was save 2 copies of the same value and just inserted 1 extra value at the beginning of the list. Okay? That's all you do. It's really powerful, but to get to this kind of thing, you've got to go through all those previous things I've been talking about, variables and templates. You've got to get through all that other stuff. But when you get through it, you start unlocking really, really clever stuff that makes a big difference, because I can't think of another way of doing this particular kind of evaluation in a template without doing something weird and wonderful. Okay. So, does that make sense? It's really not a complicated idea, but it takes some getting to get you to the point where you sort of got the hang of the idea. You can. Okay. It's really neat, and you can use it as Travis says. You can use it for alphabetical listings. Is it the same? Are we still on the A's or are we on the B's? You can do it for member IDs. Is this the same person or a different person? You can use it in all sorts of different ways, but it's unlocked because you're using these layout variable arrays. If you weren't using a layout variable array, there isn't another way of doing this. You can't in channel entries easily get, without convoluted stuff, you easily get in the same loop, what was the previous value, what was the next value, and how do I know? It's not as straightforward as you want it to be. And particularly if these things don't come from the same channel entry call, it's almost impossible. Whereas this way, you can have, if these were in if this and these were in different channel entry lists, you could generate one thing, save the value, generate another thing, save the value, and then compare the two arrays using this kind of method. It lets you do lots of things that are otherwise quite tricky. So far, so good. Right. We were going to show you how I do this worked in Pluck. I'm not sure you could see what was going on. I couldn't see what's going on in Pluck. But anyway, this is a gift slide. But if we have time at the end, I can come back and show you some other Pluck stuff. But let's kick on. Right. So we're almost at the end, you'll be pleased to know. Right. Okay. So how can you use layouts to simplify template debugging? This is almost a side effect of layout, template layouts and layout variables. But again, it's one of these things where I don't know how I would do my work without access to it. It's one of these things where, yeah. And it particularly becomes true if you start doing these funky things like using conditionals based on offset lists and whatever. But okay. Each step in your layout flow appears in EE's template debugger. So if you've got 5 different templates making up your whole page, the EE's template debugger will break out each of those templates in turn and show you what's going on in each of those templates one after the other, which is really handy. So if all you're doing is the whole thing about doing dry, you can see whether or not it's going to the right templates and what's going on. If you're using switching, template conditional stuff that we did earlier on, you can see which templates get evaluated as you run through evaluating a template or an entry. You can see what templates are getting chosen. We've done some sites where we've had multiple switches during the course of building the page. So you start off, and it's not just like, are we logging in, not logged in, but we'll have multiple paths through trees of templates. And if you want to work out what the hell happened then, being able to open the template debugger and just work through and see what actually EE was doing when it was building the page is really, really helpful. Okay, but more, every layout variable you create is listed in the template debugging listing. Not only that, if you change the values, those changes are also shown as you work through the template debugging listing. So it really gives you a lot of insight to what's going on in the page that you're building. And that's useful anyway, but it's particularly useful if you're starting to do some of these more advanced things with variables and variable arrays and so on. I'm going to show you a very simple example. I need to hop out of this presentation to do that. Okay, so this is a really simple, this is just for, this is a very simple site. This is for a cricket club, which I happen to be helpful administering in this country. So this is just a cricket club, anyway, and it's like, it's their little website-y thing and so on. But down the bottom here, so anyway, down here somewhere, we've got template debugging turned on. Okay, so here's your template debugging standard stuff. Building up this page, I don't know if I can make this bigger. I'm not very good at this. It's probably going to break something, but we'll see what happens. Oh, look at that. Right. Okay, so this is just standard template debugging. You'll have seen hopefully before in doing your work. If not, there's this thing called template debugging. It's really, really handy. Anyway, down here, it's just doing all sorts of stuff, and it's doing a channel entries call, and blah, 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 and running a custom add-on. And then it says, oh, processing layout templates. And it says the first one I'm going to do is called Pulse Step 1. So we've finished whatever the opening template was. I think it's called index or something, but whatever that one's finished, and we're going to move on to the next one. And so it says, I'm going to get template from the file, and I'm going to do some stuff. And oh, by the way, I've got some template layout variables that were saved in the previous template. And normally they're hidden like this, but you can click on this and it'll show them to you. And here you can see in the first of the templates that we're working through to build that page you saw at the top, lots of stuff has been saved into these variables. Some of them are just values. So these ones, like channel is info and the URL title's home. That's to help work out what channel entry to open. It's like it's looking for a thing called home in the channel called your info. And so when we do channel entry calls later in the template stack, we make sure we're pulling the right data from the right place. There's some arrays, and so here we've got some positions that we want to show, and we've got the email addresses of the people in those positions and the name of the people in those positions, and we've got another set of arrays to do with who's on the committee. And all these things have been saved, but you can see them. And you can see that we've got seven committee members, but only 3 captains, and so on. And that's all listed out. And we've got some more variables down here. Now, these all were generated on the first template in the page that we're using, or template we're building to build up this page. And we go through this, and it does some stuff on this second page, this one we've come to. And so you can see it's running some channel entries calls, and it's doing some other funky stuff with JCOGS type add-ons, which we'll skip through. And we get down to the bottom here, and we come to eventually, here we go, we get back to layout templates call again. And it says, oh, we're going to do this, and we're going to move to another one called switch. And here, and you probably from what I said before, if you were paying attention, you'll know what switch template does. It's just a conditional switching template which looks at some of the content that's been developed and chooses which template to then process based on in this case, what the page purpose is. So we've said this is in the channel info, and we've got the URL title of the page, and it therefore determines what templates we're going to include in the stack based on the fact that we know what page we're trying to build. Anyway, and it says layout variables, and we go to the layout variables, and all the ones we saw before are still there, but we've got a whole load of new ones that have been added, and these were added on the second template that we worked through. And you can see exactly what they are, and we can see, for example, down here, where we're going to. Well, we're going to, the switch template is going to go and switch us to this page called Pulse. And so it goes on, and we keep on going through here, and we've got, we go, there's another template switch here, we're going to a thing called Pulse Step 2, and then we keep going through here, and we've got more variable display, and we've got more things being run. And somewhere down here, we've got a final one, I think, lurking. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. There we go, layout templates. We get another one, and we get Pulse Base. And Base is, in this particular site, the HTML framework that everything gets shoved into to generate the page. And we can look in here, and we've got the same list of variables, but we've got even more lurking on this one now than we had before. We should have all that exact same. I think some of them get changed as we go through here. Anyway, so there we go. A couple of things to note in here, which are super nerdy. Here you'll see we've got a template variable lurking. So that's in this variable here called critical CS, we've got a template variable. Due to the way in which EE evaluates stuff, some things don't get evaluated until the very, very end of the process. And one of those is these template variables. And so you can't actually get the template variable values out earlier in the template stack. You have to wait until everything's finished, and then they get shoved in at the end. So these things, you see them floating around still as their unprocessed EE tag form, but eventually they get swapped out by EE. And reading time, that's just that add-on that thing wasn't working at the time, so that's why it's not there. So that's an example of how you can use template debugging with layouts to get a better understanding of what you're doing, particularly if you're using template layouts. It gives you a lot more insight into what's going on than you'd otherwise have. Okay, enough of that. Let's go back to this. And we can see it again in Technicolor on the Plux site. Right, next one, replacing embeds and stash. So I have a little crusade to get rid of embeds and stash. And we're very near the end, so just hang in there. We're almost there. Right. Right, embeds and stash. People will be familiar with embeds and stash. They know what they are? Yeah. Right, this is the Jeopardy one. Who's actually used stash recently? Oh, embeds. Who uses embeds? Okay. Right. Okay. Almost always, not absolutely always, but almost always, you can get rid of embeds and stash and replace them with layout variables. There are certainly some situations where you can't, but actually the number of times where you can't get rid of them and replace them with layout variables is really very small. So I'm not saying you could never find a case where stash would be a really good idea or an embed would be a really good idea, but actually the number of times when it's a really good idea is very small compared to the number of times when it's not a good idea. Let's talk about why. Okay, illustration, I forgot about this one. Let me show you this. This bit is fun. This is a real site, okay? I don't know if I can make this bigger, perhaps this works. Oh, look at that, it does. Right, this is a real site, currently live on internet. Not one of ours, not one of ours. But this is a real site. And I'm not going to point fingers at the person responsible, but no, somebody is responsible for this travesty. Okay, why do I say it's a travesty? Well, if you look through here, I'm on the wrong one. Let's go to the index one. Right, this is the index template for this particular page on this particular site.
Can you zoom that in one second?
I'll try and zoom that one in. That's a good call, thank you. Right, so they're using speed. Don't worry, ignore speedy. Here, embed include a head file. A bit of include something called after body. A bit further on, embed include header. So we've got 3 embeds so far, and we've only just got a little way into this page. If we scroll on a bit further, down here we have. Keep going. It's bigger when you have to. When it's zoomed in, it goes on longer. Here we go. Down here, embed include footer. So 1 template, 4 embeds. 4 embeds? 4 embeds. Let's have a look at what those embeds actually contain. So this is the first one, and it looks like our boilerplate HTML that we've been looking elsewhere with a little bit of JavaScript at the bottom of the page. Okay, there's no evaluation, there's nothing going on in here. It's a static file, but it's being called as an embed. Okay, absolutely no need to do this at all, because to make the embed, EE creates a whole new evaluation engine, and all it does, looks as there's nothing to do here, and returns whatever the content is back into the place it came from. It's a complete waste of time. You could stick it inline into the template we were looking at, or you could stick it into a layout stack and have it. You could do lots of other things too, but complete and utter waste of time to have it in here. And it makes your site slower because it takes time. Let's look at the second one. Oh, it's nothing at all again. So we're opening up a whole new EE evaluation instance to have something that says call an iframe with Google. What are you doing? Anyway, so that's the second one. Third one, it looks a bit more complicated. And somewhere in here, we've got some low search stuff going on. We've got more low search stuff going on. We've got a whole load of stuff here. So it's generating some content. And it's got some more JavaScript lurking down at the bottom. But anyway, we've got some stuff going on here. But there's actually nothing much going on in here either that we really need to be worrying about. And again, we could do this another way. We didn't need to call another instance of EE just to get this piece of information out. And we look at the fourth one. Here we've got a channel entries call and a whole load of stuff going on. And we get to the bottom and it's got more JavaScript and even more JavaScript and even more JavaScript. So anyway, and I think that's it for this one. Yeah, okay. So we've got here a page which is calling loads and loads of embeds. None of them were actually needed. So we could have done all of it, actually in this case, we could have done all of this within the same page. We could actually have one template and put all of that stuff in here just as inline, because it's not like we've got a channel entry loop going on in here otherwise. So sometimes people do embeds because they have a channel entries loop and they want to do a different channel entries call and they need to get a clean space and don't want to do it inside the loop and so on, and you go off and you do it somewhere else. But here, we haven't got anything really going on in here in terms of processing on this page. Oh, we've got a little channel, we've got a loop there anyway. Oh, and that's called, oh, I remember now, yeah. So that's calling channel entries there. Actually, that's calling the same channel entries call that we saw in the footer. So we're calling the same channel entry call twice in this and generating 4 instances of EE evaluation engine to get some output. Now, how could you do this differently? Well, if we put this into 2 templates, we could have a channel entries call, and we could get out all of the content that's in here into one layout variable. We could make another layout variable to get the stuff that's coming out into the footer and save that into thing. And we only have one channel entry call because it's only calling one page each time. We could get those 2 things out, stick them into layout variables. We could, if we wanted to, put all of the rest of that stuff into a framework HTML template. And we could build up this whole page with just 2 layouts. One to get the channel entries call done, one to put in all the other stuff, the boilerplate, JavaScript and everything else. If we did that, we'd have one EE instance being called we'd only have one channel entry being called, and we get the same output. Here we've got the same call being made twice. We've got 4 instances of EE being run to generate 1 page of output. There's no need to do it at all. Layout variables let you avoid all this. And I'd like to say I've got a magic one to show you, which I've done. I haven't done this. But I thought we came across this by chance, and it's such a good example of how not to go about doing this. You can understand why the person did it, thinking they wanted to be dry, they wanted to separate things out and have legibility, but they're doing it in a way which is incredibly inefficient. It makes the site slower, makes it harder to maintain. It's just not a good thing to do. So, right, enough of that. Let's come back to where we were. Right, so, to summarize what I've just said, that's all. There are times when embeds can be useful. So I'm not saying you can never, ever find a case to use an embed, but the number of times when an embed is the only solution that works, tiny. They have disadvantages that work against them. Each embed is a unique EE evaluation instance. It's completely clean. Getting information into it's hard. You have to use embed variables to poke the variables in. Getting information out is even harder still, because all you get back is the output of the embed. So if there's something clever going on, you can't capture layout variables in the embed and get them back out into where you came from. It's like a closed box, expensive to use, very hard to work with. Getting stuff in is difficult, getting stuff out is difficult. There are some places where embeds and stash, and I think that case I've just shown you, they're used as a panic solution. I can't think what else to do. Oh, I'll use a pro variable, shove it in. Or I can't think what else to do. I'll shove it into an embed. It's easy to say, oh, you shouldn't do that. And I understand the times when you think, I haven't got the time for this, I don't want to think about it. I'll just shove all that into a pro variable, I'll shove it off somewhere into a template partial, or get rid of it somehow. But if you are concerned about the performance of your site, if you're concerned about who's going to maintain your site after you have stopped working on it and given it on to somebody else, they're not helpful things to do. And taking a pause and saying, can I do this without burying code into an embed? Can I do this without shoving stuff into an obscure stash variable? Can I do this without sticking things into pro variables which have weird oddities about them which make them hard to use? Do so. And layout variables give you that way out. And sometimes I think people do this panic thing because they're not familiar with layout variables being available. If they knew, if the guy who did that page knew about layout variables, I can't believe he would have chosen to build the page the way he did. So hopefully one of the things that we're looking to do with what we're talking about today is to just plant the idea in the back of your mind. The next time you come across one of these, what am I going to do? Can you use a layout solution? Would it help? And there are lots of things you can do with layouts that are really neat and powerful, that aren't hugely complicated, and are in line with the way in which EE works internally. So it's smoother, cleaner, easier to do than the disruption that comes from using either an add-on or using embeds and so on. Okay. Right. I've never said all that, so I'm not going to do that again. We've got a real life example, but more the same. Right, stash. Stash is in its day, stash was a really, really, really good thing. And it did things and allowed you to do things in EE that EE simply couldn't do. And it's got a lot of momentum because of how useful it was back in the day. To the best of my knowledge, Stash is not really being maintained anymore. I think someone bumped it up to work with the newer version of PHP, but it's not really being maintained anymore. And within reason, much of what it does isn't actually needed anymore. So you can work around and do the same thing that you were going to do with Stash some other way. Therefore, our recommendation, our opinion, our view on this is if you can avoid using stash in a new build, you should. Because if no one's maintaining it, the chances are at some point it's going to break or get passed on by either changes in EE or changes in PHP or something. But if no one's looking after it, it's a risky thing to put your site, make your site dependent upon. The other thing is, it suggests you haven't really stopped to think about how you can make the best use of the current capabilities of EE. And that's how I've always done it. I'll carry on doing it that way, but I can't bring myself to think about doing things in a new way. There are lots of features available in EE now that weren't available in the past. And those new features can do things that people have been using stash to do. Variable modifiers do a lot of the stuff, or allow you to do a lot of the stuff that was done using stash variables inline without any messing around, without any fuss and bother. Layout variables are part of that picture too. And I'm not going to say that there's no circumstances. There are some things that stash could do which broke the EE evaluation model, like permanently storing variables you can get back in different places and stuff. It's nice, but it's against the philosophy of how EE works in some ways. And it's a bit like people doing inline PHP in templates. You can do it, and EE supports it. It's a really dodgy thing to do in many ways. It's like security, all that sort of stuff. But you can do it if you want to. And sometimes people will say, that's the only way to get it fixed is to put inline PHP into the templates. I'm not sure that's true, but it's definitely something to advance. I think the same is becoming true of stash. I'm not saying it's a dreadful, it was brilliantly conceived and brilliantly executed and very, very useful for a very long time. I just don't think it's that useful anymore. And I don't know of many instances where what you want to do can only be done by stash. And usually, I have had people argue this with me, and usually the instances they come up with are instances where what you're doing is something which EE shouldn't be doing in the first place. Okay. And fair enough then, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. So it's another add-on to add to your build as well, and makes everything a bit bigger, a bit slower, a bit more hard to look after. So my encouragement to you is, I'm not going to go through a great long exhaustive list of places where you can swap out stash and use layout variables, because it would just be a repeat of what I've done. Because in our experience, for the most part, people don't use stash functionality in any comprehensive way. Stash can do huge amounts of things, but the number of times I've seen a template in a site that's using anything really complicated with stash is very small. It's usually just used as a bolt holder, shove something in, because I can't think of another way of working with it, I'll get it back later on. And actually, you do have choices, you do have alternatives, and layout variables is one of the ways into doing these alternative things. So stash, not a bad thing, but not necessarily a good thing. Caching, right. So, who's your question? Caching, got them in the end. Right, general thing, I was going to, if I had the time, but I was on holiday for a couple of weeks, so I didn't really have the time, I was going to try and do a side-by-side comparison of a really badly designed page versus one with template layouts and like do their evaluation speed. In general, template layouts don't impose any kind of speed penalty on your site. So I've heard people say, oh, I don't want to do that because it's going to make my pages slower. It's not true. It's one instance just being rolled over and over again. So the amount of work that ExpressionEngine does to process template layouts is relatively small compared to the benefit and the value you get back. As a consequence, compared to that page we saw with 4 embeds and 2 calls to the same channel entry loop and all that sort of stuff, template layout solutions can be more efficient and less demanding on your server than the alternatives. You can certainly, within using template layouts, you can certainly use tag caching. You can cache your channel entry calls, you can do all that sort of stuff that you would do within the tags. It doesn't work well with template caching. Because when template caching, all the EE does is return you the pre-calculated HTML that you did last time you saved it. And hopefully, if you have been understanding half of what I've said, the fun and the power of layouts is that it lets you calculate things dynamically as you're processing the template and make choices as you're processing the template about what you want to include, what you don't want to include, what's the appropriate sequence of templates to work through. And if you shove into the middle of that a block of pre-canned HTML that has been saved from the last time you did it, chances are you're going to mess up whatever flow you're going through. So in our experience, the template caching, EE's template caching doesn't really help. If you've got a page where it's so complicated you need to cache it, our recommendation is probably to use Speedy or something like that, some sort of static caching solution. But it's really messy if you've got dynamic content on a page, because Speedy is a static caching system rather than anything else. So what we'd probably suggest and what we do when we're doing that is, if you can get away with it, we use layout variables and template layouts. If it's going too slowly because what you're doing is too complicated, we end up writing a custom add-on. And you can accelerate a lot of this stuff by using custom add-ons. So all that stuff with like the list processing that we were doing before, and is it this month or last month, you could do that in PHP in an add-on, and that would be an efficient way of doing it too. It's just not everybody has the desire to get into writing custom add-ons, and I completely understand that. And for those people who don't want to get into writing custom add-ons or think that the support issues associated with having them on a site which you give to a client is too great, template layouts, because they're so transparent and so visible, are actually quite a good solution. So if you can do it in template layouts, our view is always do it in the least complicated way. But say if you've got a problem with speed and you can't get enough speed out of doing it with a template layout solution, then picking out bits and making them hardwired into an add-on is usually the only other option you've got. If your page is a brochure site and it hasn't got any of this fancy stuff in it, then you can build it with layout templates perfectly well, and you can cache a whole lot with Speedy, and it's fine. It's just if you want to use all this dynamic path analysis that's going on, that doesn't work well with caching. Okay? Make sense? Conclusion. Layout variables, powerful, easy to use, efficient, flexible, fairly well documented. And that's it. So that's it. So if you've got questions, by all means ask me. I hope you found all of that stuff somewhat useful. And if you didn't, apologies. If you did, please. Okay. And Jelle will be back later on when he's finished doing whatever he's doing. And if you've got a preference, you can ask us about any of this stuff this evening over Twiglets and beer or whatever it is we've got coming up at the thingammy. What's it called? The Fox thingy. The Fox thingy. That's the way to look at it. So whatever the Fox thingy is, I do hope you'll be able to come to the Fox thingy. That thingy, if you've got questions, by all means ask me anything you want to know then too. Hopefully, it all made sense. If you do have any questions right now or stuff, by all means, I'm not going anywhere, but you may have had completely enough of this topic and you want to, like, let me out. I want to do something else.
I think for time, you probably should be questions. I know there will be questions, but I'm really glad this is recorded. This is like a really valuable for the community at large. No, this is great. I just think for scheduling, probably.
How not to do a presentation, example. Exactly.
It's actually kind of a trap.
I mean, if people want to ask questions about this, I'm very interested in it. So.
Right. So, are we done, or are we doing questions? I don't know what we want to do now. I'm completely confused. So, you can. I don't know.
I'd say if people want to.
There's. I'm conscious that Travis, you're on next, though, aren't you? And there's somebody on after you. So we've used up all of the afternoon, and I don't want to. It's like. So maybe what we ought to do is let you reflect on all of that stuff that you heard. And having had a good cogitate and muse on that, if you have any questions, you can ask me another time. Or Slack me. I'm always on Slack, and I'm always happy to answer questions. So if you want to just ping me on Slack, always happy to do that too. Right? Done?